Mijn volgende gast staat bekend als een van de beste liedjeschrijvers ter wereld. Met zijn poëtische teksten en intense optredens heeft hij legioenen fans opgebouwd wereldwijd. In de loop der jaren is de ruige punkartiest, die 20 jaar lang heroïneverslaafd was, uitgegroeid tot een charmante verschijning. Immer in pak, headliner op de grootste festivals ter wereld, maar ook een begenadigd dichter en schrijver. Als je de jonge Nick Cave had gevraagd wat hij later wil worden, dan had hij gezegd beeldend kunstenaar. Wat een feest dat dat nu alsnog is gebeurd en dat hij bij ons in Nederland debuteert met zijn allereerste solo-tentoonstelling in een museum. Dames en heren, hier is Nick Cave. Welcome, Nick.
Welcome. I mean, hello.
Hello. Are you comfortable?
I'm good.
Getting
yeah.
comfortable. It's, you're going to have to trust me. The introduction was in Dutch, but it was very flattering.
I thought so. I didn't understand a word, but...
Maybe that's easier that way. It's a pleasure to have you here. It's an honor to have you here. I think it's also pretty brave that you're here, because mostly when famous musicians decide to become artists later in life, they have a pretty bad reputation.
It's for very good reason. It's usually a disastrous idea. I have somewhat of an objection to that, and I always felt quite uncomfortable about entering the art world, because of that, the idea that it's kind of like a hobby, and you've got your main job and you kind of dabble in something. And I don't like the idea of being a dabbler. But I just got really swept up with the ceramics that I'm doing now, and it's become a completely fundamental part of what I do. And I don't know, so...
It's not dabbling, it's not a hobby.
People can judge what they like from these things, but for me, they're very important.
They're gorgeous.
Thank you.
I love them.
You like them?
I love them. Absolutely love them. And we're going to look at them soon. Before we dive into your art, your physical art, we're going to refresh everyone's memory with how creative you've been in the past 50 years.
It was just fucking crazy.
Please welcome Nick Cave.
In the back seat.
Do you actually mind taking your glasses off?
Music for me is a kind of abstract way of articulating loss. Into my arms, oh Lord, into my arms. I think my younger self would be impressed in that I've just sort of hung around.
Stacks of green paper in his red right hand.
I feel like I still got things to say, and I feel energized about things, and, you know, on it goes. Maybe it's time to come home. All right. Thank you.
The creative work has never stopped. It's only become more, actually. And a couple of years ago, you began working with clay. You started making these figurines. The very first time you started working with the material, with the clay, what was it like, your first attempt?
I'd actually made them as a child, so I knew how to make them. I'd actually done a pottery course, but the pandemic happened. I suddenly didn't have a job because I couldn't go on tour, I couldn't make music, I couldn't be with my band members. So I was essentially alone with my creative self, and I just got this urge to return to something that I'd given up years ago, which was visual art, and to do something in ceramics.
And the first attempt, Nick?
Well, it was strange because my mother used to my mother loved my ceramics as a child, right? When I was about 15, I used to make these little figurines, and she loved them very much, and she had them for all her life sitting around her. She would sit in her chair at 92 and have these little figurines sitting around her, and on the day that I was supposed to go in and start doing these figurines in a studio where I was going to go, my mother died. She was 92 and she died peacefully, but she died. And I was ringing up the person who was going to teach me how to do the figurines to cancel, and my wife said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm cancelling today." And she said, "No, you're not. You go and do your job." And it was an extraordinary experience, because when I got into the studio, I sat down with this lump of clay, this lump of earth, and started to try and make something from it. And in a way, the sorrowful nature of the day dissipated in some kind of way, and I got lost to the whole thing. And it's an extraordinary thing for me to feel that I can sit there and make out of this earth.
It's nothing.
This nothing, exactly. Yeah. Fire it, colour it, glaze it, and turn it into something that is hopefully meaningful.
Meaningful and beautiful, and also something you can hold. So different
Exactly.
than writing something or music. You can actually pick it up
That's
and
exactly
touch it.
right. Yeah.
Bring it home. Did your wife send you to the studio because it was your mother that had died, and she thought your mother loved those figurines? She would want you to work on that?
My wife's a mysterious woman, and I wouldn't like to say why she does things, but she knows me very well, and she knows from experience what has helped me through these sorts of situations in the past.
And she was right in this situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've
described working with clay, and I'm quoting you here, transporting you to another world. Where does it take you?
Did I say that?
You did. You said it's trance-like.
There is something that I felt take over. It felt like I was doing something that I was meant to do, something that I always wanted to do. But, you know, I went to art school, and that's what I wanted to be, a figurative artist, or a painter, actually. But I failed after 2 years and just slipped into being in a band. And this band thing kind of took off.
It was a hobby that got out of hand?
It was a hobby that got out of hand.
Pretty successful hobby.
And actually, I've never felt like even though I've written hundreds and hundreds of songs, I've never felt like a real musician, in a sense. I've always felt something of an imposter. When I'm around my musician friends, they talk about music in a way that's with an understanding and a nuance that I don't actually have.
Are you serious?
I feel that very much so. And I really felt back at home, at home in the world when I started doing these.
And no longer an imposter.
Exactly. I felt like I was doing something that, you know,
were
some sort of
destined to do.
latent activity that I'd sort of abandoned at some point. It was very mysterious.
It's mysterious, and I can imagine also, is it sad to think that you had spent so many years doing something else, then finally you put your hands in the clay and you were back home where you belong?
Well, I didn't. It's sad. I've done very well as a musician.
You got away with it, Nick, for a very long time.
I've been masquerading, but I'm very happy in a way that I failed art school and I became a musician, and I've written songs, and I love the songs that I write. But there is something that comes very naturally with this thing.
As I said, I love them. I think they're gorgeous. They're also weird. They're also endearing. They're on display in the Museum Voorlinde here in Holland, and they're not supposed to be seen apart from each other. They belong together. They're 17.
They're a set.
Yeah, and there's 17 sculptures or figurines, and they tell a story together. The entire life of a devil. And I want to show the audience a few so they have an idea what we're talking about. Here we see the devil discovering love. Then we see him going to war, also a gorgeous one. And here we see him, this is an absolutely beautiful one. He has remorse. Everything in the devil's life, from birth to death. Is this in some way your story?
I mean, if you look at them, it starts off, it is from birth to death in 17 stages. It starts off in innocence, the devil as an innocent thing, and moves through experience and ends up with forgiveness. And I feel in a general way that's a trajectory that we all should at least follow in some kind of way, that at the end of experience and at the end of love is forgiveness. And we need to be able to forgive each other that needs to be the primary thing that we do. And I feel very much that this is no longer a part of the way our society works at all. That we've forgotten how to forgive each other. The world's split up into separate camps, and that we need the concept of forgiveness. Within these things, it goes from a general feeling towards something that's explicitly, acutely personal. There's a figurine where the devil kills a child, and I've had a loss of a child in my life, or two actually, and when that happens within the 17, the whole thing changes into something that's much more concerned with existential matters of loss and grief and forgiveness.
You've written songs about it, made music about it. You've written letters to people about it. You've spoken about it openly, about losing your children, about the grief that comes with that, and the sense of loss. Is it, in some way, has it been helpful that it was out in the open? Yeah.
Initially, it was all I could do. I have to say, it was all really I could do was to be able to speak about it in some kind of way. By articulating it, I think I learnt a language to deal with it, and I'm lucky in that respect that I was able to do that. I think a lot of people can't find words to wrap around this unbelievable experience that they're going through, grief and loss, and they're unable to articulate what is going on and are kind of left inside this terrible thing. I was lucky in that response that I was artistic, I could write songs about it, I could talk to people about it, I could answer people's letters about it, and learnt basically a kind of language around loss and grief, which was extremely helpful for me.
You've also said that it changes to lose your children, to lose a child, changes you fundamentally. It changes your DNA. How has it made you a different person?
Well, I think we all, I've lost two children. This is unusual, but it's also not. I feel that we are all creatures of loss, that we are all losing things all the time. We will, each of us, go through deeply devastating things in our lives. I think many people here understand that fundamentally because they've been through these things. Some perhaps don't understand that, but they will go through these things. We are essentially, as human beings, creatures of loss, I would say. And this is the very beautiful thing about what we are as humans, that we are vulnerable and precious. And I think that's just what I want to try and tell people, really, is that we have value. And that's very much to do with an understanding that I came to after the loss of my children.
You've also described for people, because people come to you for advice, to hear how you feel about this or think about this, you've also described the concept of joy after experiencing such fundamental loss. And I can imagine when people are in the midst of this horrific grief, that they can be angry when you speak of joy.
Yeah,
what do you tell people about having joy after something like this?
Yeah, I have something called the Red Hand Files, where people write in and ask me questions about all sorts of different things, and I do my best to answer some of their questions. And one of the things that does come in occasionally is people who have recently lost, especially a child, who are furious about the idea that I can say you can actually be happy, and that not just happy but joyful about things. In fact, controversially, you can be more joyful ultimately because you've experienced, because this experience has like expanded the frontiers of your heart. You've become more engaged in the world in some way, and things become more joyful when they happen. But when you're first inside grief, at the point of devastation, it's impossible to understand this basic truth.
So you have to have trust.
Yeah, you manage as best you can. You know.
47 years ago, you said, I failed at art school. I understood always, Nick, that you got kicked out.
I didn't get kicked out. It's
It sounded so juicy to say you got kicked out.
well, they didn't want me back.
Okay. Somewhere in between failing and getting kicked out. You were at the time training to be an artist.
I asked to leave.
You asked to leave. Look, we
Yeah.
have this great picture of you from then. I love this. You asked to leave. Why, actually?
Well, are you talking about art school? Are you talking
Yeah, why you
about,
asked to leave?
Because I didn't do any art.
You were talking to the other people.
I was essentially I went from a this is after I'd been to an all boys pretty strict all boys school where to be an artist or to have any interest in art just meant you were I don't even want to say, but
Wanker?
you know, wanker, homosexual. You know,
Bad connotations
that
at
kind
that
of
time,
thing.
yeah.
It was very much a sport-orientated thing, and so when I went to art school, I was suddenly surrounded by these people, like these people in this picture here, of artistic types. It was the most extraordinary thing. So even though I failed art school, I learnt a lot from these types of characters.
Now you're back with a vengeance. Your own solo exposition at a museum. How does it feel after all these years to finally fulfill that dream from the young man that you were then to become the artist?
Look, first of all, they're being exhibited at Vollinden Museum. This is one of the most beautiful galleries, beautiful museums in existence, as far as I'm concerned. So the thought that I'm actually that they live in this place, they're looked after by these incredible people. They feel these vulnerable little things feel in extremely safe hands, and so to see them set up as they are now, it's unbelievably moving for me. You know, it's these little guys always feel like they needed looking after, and I
Like
feel
you want
like
to take them home.
Yeah, well, I feel like Vollinden is the right place for them
For
to
them
be
to
looked
be right
after.
now. De beelden van Nick Cave zijn vanaf zaterdag te zien in Museum Vollinden. Thank you so much for joining us.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.